Hey guys, Opal here. One of the most frequent questions that I get asked is, how do you come up with your formulas for crafting magic items? Is it all just made up? The answer is yes, but there's a method to the madness, and I want to show you my process as I come up with formulas for various magic items today on Flutes Loot. You can find several formulas already for magic items in my article, Formulas for Crafting Popular Magic Items. I've got, I think, about 17 of them here, and I'm always happy to add more. I had one comment on my article about this specific item, the Dragontooth Dagger, and I kind of went over how I came up with the magic item formula. So we're just going to go over this magic item today. So the Dragontooth Dagger, it is a dagger fashioned from the tooth of a dragon. While the blade is obviously a fang or predator's tooth, the handle is leather wrapped around the root of the tooth, and there is no crossguard. And so for effects, you gain a +1 bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls that you make with this weapon. On a hit with this weapon, the target takes an extra 1d6 acid damage. And Draconic Potency is another ability. It says, when you're attacking against enemies of the Cult of the Dragon, the dagger's bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls increases to +2 and extra acid damage increases to 2d6. So what I like to do is just look up the lore surrounding the item. This item is particularly special against the Cult of the Dragon, so if we look them up on this Forgotten Realms wiki, it might give us some information. Cult of the Dragon. So these guys are known as wearers of purple, so I think that purple leather maybe isn't such a coincidence, and we should focus on that as part of our components. Samaster, a powerful wizard, was a necromancer. I know the lore of this guy. He was a mage, and then he came up with some meta magic, and he became a chosen of Mystra, the mother of all magic, and scorned her when he attacked his own colleagues. And then he was killed, sort of, by Lathander, but then he had contingencies in place to become a lich. So this guy, the Cult of the Dragon, is all about raising up super powerful dragons to become Draco Liches, which are undead dragons. So I would think that necromancy or anti-necromancy powers might be important to the lore of this dagger as well. Okay, other components of this blade is that it does acid damage. So I like to look up spells that have acid damage. We're just going to look up in D&D Beyond spells. So we've got a few different spells that have acid damage, and obviously we're not going to be able to see because I'm not logged in here. So we're actually going to use a non-kosher source. Sorry, D&D. Let's try D&D tools. And we are going to look at material components. So right here, acid breath has a material component. Let's look at what it is. A handful of fire ants. Acid fog has a material component of pinch of dried powdered peas and powdered animal hoof. Okay. So now this one right here, acid orb. Nope, acid rain has a material component of a flask of acid. Makes sense. Acid sheath. I'm not familiar with this one, but sculpture, that interesting, but probably not helpful. Acid storm is a flask of acid as well. And then we've got energy spheres. 5 glass marbles, okay. And 2 more. Melf's acid arrow is a dart is a focus. Oh, powdered rhubarb leaves and an adder's stomach. An adder's a poisonous snake. And then Mestel's acid breath. Handful of fire ants as well. Okay, so those are some examples of material components, and if I'm a dungeon master coming up with a formula, I'm going to think, what will my players encounter? What will my players encounter in the next few sessions? One important thing to remember is that this is a rare weapon, and it's a magic weapon. So we have to look at the rules, and I've got them listed in a table here for crafting magic items according to Xanathar's guide. So rare items require a challenge rating of 9 through 12. So players together as a whole party will go on a quest, and they will fight monsters whose CR sum up to or equal 9 through 12. The cost for gathering supplies or preparing for this quest or even just traveling to gain these things will be 2,000 gold pieces, and it'll take 10 work weeks to officially craft this item. Work weeks are 5 days per week, 8 hours per day on average. It doesn't have to be consistent or consecutive, but it takes time to perfect this item and to make it usable and durable and have balance. And I mean, we're making a dagger and we want it to actually work as a dagger. So we are looking at 10 weeks to make that happen. A quest with CR 9 through 12 and then 2,000 gold pieces. So I'm looking at these things. I have a list of these material components of fire ants, powdered rhubarb, powdered peas, and animal hoof, and an adder stomach. So maybe what I'm thinking is we've got our Dragontooth. Here we go. We've got our obvious Dragontooth. We're looking at dragons in that challenge rating 9 through 12. And we probably want it to be acid specific dragons. So, oh my gosh. So 9 through 12, here we go. We have a lot of dragons. But the one dragon that does acid damage is a black dragon. So I'm actually going to look for black dragon. So challenge rating 7, that almost fits in our 9 through 12. 14's a little too high. So I would say we should come up with an encounter that involves a young dragon, and we can either upscale this encounter by adding in legendary actions or lair effects or lair actions, or giving it some minions or something, or we could have a second encounter that gathers more components. So challenge rating 6. Perhaps let's see Looks like an adder might only be challenge rating 1/2 in 4th edition. So that might not be... What about a giant adder? Giant poisonous snake might just be good enough. Challenge rating 1/4. Oh no, that's less. Swamp adder. That sounds interesting. Well, we definitely want to think about some other components for this item so that we can increase the challenge rating and the gold cost and the time required. Because it might just take a few days to track down and then kill a dragon, or even if we don't kill a dragon, if we can find a dragon's lair, maybe it's lost some teeth or maybe like a claw or something, and we can just gather the component. I don't know. But we have to fashion that tooth to be the perfect shape. That's probably going to require stone mason tools or even like wood carver tools, maybe jeweler tools, but that doesn't seem as likely. Smith tools, possibly. So I either have to be proficient in some tools, or I have to go hire out this part of like creating the right shape for a dagger. But if we have our Dragontooth and then we've got this leather part. So this leather part seems very particularly purple due to the Cult of the Dragon relationship. And I would say that looking at those other components that we found for the spells, the material components, I think that we could use a lot of those components to make a dye for the leather. So if we took the fire ants and the powdered peas, powdered rhubarb, and the animal hoof would make a good like starchy base for the paint. And then we could combine these to make a dye and put it inside of the stomach of the adder and use that as a mordant to bind the dye to the leather. That would take some time to create and to gather the components and then we could let the leather sit in that for some time. And this will create the purple leather. You could make the leather very specific to this creature. So if there's a leather that is anti-corrosive against maybe the creature's own acid, that might even be helpful. Gelatinous cubes. Onkhead, what do those look like? Those look more like they have carapace, not quite leathery. Not jellies. A cloaker to latch onto piercing and 5 acid. Cloakers don't do acid. Do they? And plus they're a high CR, right? CR 8? Yeah, that's not great for our encounter. Bubbling, corrosive, bandits, giant soldier ants. You could have them fight giant ants to get the red fire ants or something. I don't know. I'm not really feeling any of these monsters. I mean, you could even just use, like, I don't know if you could use snakeskin instead of leather. Does it specifically say handle is wrapped in leather? So maybe the type of leather doesn't matter. If we're not finding anything like obvious, I would say just any regular leather, but they would have to dye it using the process that I mentioned and then craft it onto this dagger. Another thing to think about is what makes it magical. The tooth came from a dragon, and dragons are magic, obviously, but is there something else that we could include to make it more magical? Especially where this is relating to the cult of the dragon, how it does more damage to them, like a lot more damage to Cult of the Dragon members. One part of Samaster, the founder of the Cult of the Dragon, part of his lore is being influenced by the deity Bane, the god of tyranny, and then getting scorned, or scorning himself, I guess, scorning Mystra, the goddess of magic. So or even like Lathander's the one who defeated him. So these are all a bunch of pantheon deities that you could somehow involve in your magic item creation. So maybe the player creates the dagger, uses their tools to shape it perfectly to fit their hand. They get the leather dyed in the special materials to make it acid resistant. Maybe that's why it has to be inside of the stomach of this giant snake, and use these specific dye ingredients is to like give it acid resistance. And then as soon as they fashion it on, they have to take it to a priest of Mystra or the temple of Mystra or whatever you have in your setting. And then the priests have to perform a ceremony to give it that focus, that purpose of fighting the cult of the dragon. This would be very cool to introduce to your players beforehand, even if you had priests of Mystra give your players the task of defeating members of the Cult of the Dragon, and then giving them this formula and saying, you would be serving this deity, and we would reward you if you take out this cell of the cult. Here is the formula. If you can get these components, we will bless this dagger, and you will be rewarded greatly with extra damage, extra power. So, to recap, the way that I would do a formula for the Dragontooth Dagger is a tooth or a claw from a young black dragon, creating a dye using fire ants, rhubarb, peas, a hoof of an animal, and an adder's stomach. The leather can be whatever type of leather is available. They can just purchase that at a store. They would have to have masonry tools to shape the dagger. And then once they have assembled the dagger in the leather, the dyed leather, they need to take it to the priests of Mystra to be ordained as an anti-Cult of Dragon dagger. So that's my process for creating this dagger. I expect that I'm going to be doing a few of these types of videos shorter, but just showing you my process and how I kind of find ways to incorporate crafting magic items into my game. I think it's super fun. I love this sort of gamification that integrates into world building. So not only am I just gathering components as I go along, but I'm actually like allowing players to incorporate world building and like meet the cult of dragon, or have dealings with the chosen of Mistra, or even just priests of Mistra. And this is just a really great way to expand your world and to have the party all come together and work together to create some magic items, which is really beneficial. And just, I mean, players just feel like so cool they made this magic item and it's an extra ability for them. So if you would like to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our channel. I will hopefully be releasing these videos frequently, maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly. So thanks for watching and happy adventuring.